Okay, now let's talk about a certain polyatomic anion, OCN minus. Okay, and let's see how many valence electrons it has. So the oxygen brings 6 valence electrons, the carbon brings 4, the nitrogen brings 5, and there's a negative charge, and the negative charge brings 1 additional electron for a total of 16 valence electrons to assign. Well, I'll let you know this has a central carbon, and so it is tethered together like that, and that uses up 4 of the valence electrons that we have, leaving us with 12, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And now we've used up all of the valence electrons to get to this structure. If we want to be really good, we'd put square brackets around, put a negative charge to remind ourselves that this whole species is going to have a negative charge at the end. Now we take this structure and we're going to do just like what we did for O3 or for CO2. We're going to look at the different ways that we can satisfy the carbon. And so the first way that we can satisfy the carbon is for the oxygen to do all of the work. And when the oxygen does all the work, it gives up 2 lone pairs, form a triple bond to carbon, and then nitrogen here hasn't really done anything. Next, we could do a share and share alike, where nitrogen and oxygen each form a double bond to the carbon. And then our final structure that we could do here would be for the nitrogen to do all the heavy lifting, form a triple bond to the nitrogen that we have there. And all 3 of these structures are good in terms of the octet rule. They satisfy oxygen, nitrogen, and carbon. However, these are inequivalent structures, and we can tell this even just by looking at one specific bond: triple bond, double bond, single bond. So these are 3 inequivalent structures, and so let's say if we had to do one structure to represent the molecule instead of 3, which would be the best? And I'm just going to go ahead with what I've already drawn here and go and assign how many electrons each of these has in the Lewis structure. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This oxygen has 5 in the Lewis. Okay, this oxygen has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the Lewis structure. This oxygen has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the Lewis structure. And then this oxygen has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electrons in the Lewis structure. Carbon here has 1, 2, 3, 4 in this Lewis structure. It has 1, 2, 3, 4 in this Lewis structure, and 1, 2, 3, 4 in that Lewis structure. And now finally, nitrogen has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, now let's for each one say what it would have from the periodic table. So an oxygen atom, we expect to have 6 from the periodic table, carbon 4, and nitrogen 5, just based on the columns they're in. 6, 4, 5, 6, 4, and 5. And so now let's assign charges. So from the periodic table, an oxygen atom has 6. In this Lewis structure, it has 5, so there's a positive charge on the oxygen. Here there's 6 and 6, so there's no charge on this oxygen. And here in the Lewis structure, it has 7. We expect it to have 6 from the periodic table, so there's a negative charge on the oxygen. Okay, carbons are going to be boring because they're all 4, 4, 4, and 4, so there's none of the structures put any charge on the carbon. And then finally for the nitrogen in this Lewis structure has 7 valence electrons. A nitrogen atom has 5, and so this nitrogen has a 2- charge. The nitrogen in this structure has 6. From the periodic table, it has 5, so it has a -1. And then finally, 5 and 5, so there's no charge here. All right, now I'm going to invoke a second rule, which is if we have to have a charge, we want to minimize first the size of the charge. And so this structure is the worst because we get a 2- charge on one of the atoms. So this is the worst for sure. but we need to decide whether this structure or this structure is better. And so what does it really come down to in these two structures? It's either a negative charge on nitrogen or a negative charge on oxygen. If you look at your electronegativity properties, oxygen is better at handling a negative charge, and so this structure is the best, and then this would be the one in the middle. Okay. This one is awful. This is by far the worst. This is the best by a little bit versus that one.